Right, and we're off.
Here we go.
Okay.
Episode 2. Yeah.
Episode 2, here we go. Writing about it.
Hi, welcome to the Full Stop podcast with me, Berenice Smith from Walk in Our Shoes, Michael Hughes from Married and Childless, and Sarah Lawrence from After the Storm. We really hope you enjoyed our first episode with Jodie Day, which was all about sharing our stories. In this episode, we're going to be talking about writing them down. We're absolutely thrilled to be joined by 4 authors, and we had so much to talk about, so we're releasing 2 episodes. In this first one, we're joined by Dr. Lorna Gibb, who talks about her book, Childless Voices. And if you're inspired to write it down, then do listen to Annie Kirby, who's sharing news about her creative writing workshops. So let's press on with the show. Hello, Lorna.
Hello.
Thank you so much for coming on to the Full Stop podcast. We're just amazed that you're here. It's very good.
Right, you're welcome.
I wanted to, I've been reading back through the book today because it's one of the most powerful books, Childless Voices, that I've read in our community. Every time I've read it, I find something new that's a hook, a thing, just these people around the world. It's absolutely fascinating. And I wanted just to know a little bit more about what drove you to write this book, because it must be quite a painful process, I would have thought. Could you tell me more about that?
It started out that way. I think it came about more by accident than by design originally. I mean, I'm a writer anyway, and I was going through this experience of discovering that I was childless with my husband. And as a consequence of that, we decided to travel, and we moved to the Middle East because I had a job at the university there and my husband had some prospects. And in the Middle East, which is you'll have seen in the book, one of my students started talking to me about her 2 mothers. And so I got very interested in this particular way of adapting to childlessness. And then I started to think, well, what's it like in other countries? This is something I could explore.
Yeah, I found that quite interesting. I've travelled to the Middle East and I've worked remotely there. So I've produced books for publishers from the Middle East. So it's what I found fascinating about the book is the religious and cultural sensitivities and how that impacts on infertility. It's quite incredible, isn't it?
It is. I think because the whole act of procreation, of making children, is such a fundamental thing that it ties in so deeply to cultural attitudes, in some cases prejudices, but also to our sense of faith and wonderment and what we all wish for or hope to be true.
Absolutely. It's Halima, wasn't it? It's the lady who you first interviewed, who is the childless woman who is it's hard to define what she is.
Shared mother, really.
Yeah.
Shared mother. Yeah. All the names in the book are not the real names of the people, so that's why I kind of hesitate.
Of course,
I had to change the names for not every single case, but many of the cases in the book, the women preferred to have pseudonyms. And it's especially true in the Middle East, where culturally they didn't particularly want to be exposed as living in that particular way, which is seen by many as old-fashioned and outdated now. And in fact, when I wrote the book, it was more common. Even when I was writing that, it was more common then even than it is now. It's actually quite rare in Qatar now because Qatar has made such strides in modernity, but it's still common in other parts of the Middle East, like Yemen, for example, where plural marriage households where the first wife is infertile are fairly common.
Absolutely. It was interesting, the whole idea of bigamy almost being used as some sort of strange twisted advantage somewhere. It's a very interesting concept, I suppose, but very, very difficult to understand, I think, in our Western world.
I think the women, some of the women saw it as providing a huge advantage, because for them they got to be part of a family, and for them a family had to involve children, and it meant they had this experience and they felt there was a biological link of some kind because it was their husband who had fathered children. And for other women it was a kind of hell. So it really did vary a lot on individual cases. And one of the things I tried, I don't know how successfully when writing the book, was to be not to make kind of judgments of any kind about anyone, but rather to be a kind of conduit so people could tell their stories, especially if their stories were different to the ones that we always hear in the West. It's a kind of a certain kind of story that we hear a lot, like my own story, which is not particularly unusual or, you know, interesting or rare in the West. So I was very interested in hearing from other voices.
Absolutely. I think it comes across as a very powerful observation, and very enlightening and very educational. It's one of the books that I would like it just to be mandatory reading for everybody. I think the world would be an awfully better balanced place for everyone if they read these. Oh no, absolutely. I completely think I learn something from it all the time, and I think as a childless woman, a lot of the IVF stories in there, I think, I get that. But then you hear IVF in other parts of the world and think, oh, okay, very, very different, the emotions around it and the stigmatism. I think you make a very interesting point in the introduction to the book about how we talk about our childlessness and whether we say we are child-free and whether we are childless, and other people's judgments on that too. And I think there's an awful lot. I just sit there with it, go, yes, I understand that. It's very powerful reading. Can I ask, there's a lot of you in there, and your story, which is incredibly interesting as well. How did it feel to pull your narrative into that emotionally for you?
It was very, it was easy to write, but difficult to put out there.
Yeah.
So writing it was fine. Sharing it with my editor was fine because I had a wonderful editor and we worked very closely together, and he was incredibly sensitive. Actually seeing the book on the shelves and then getting interviews like this, or doing, you know, television news, newspaper or radio interviews, that was quite overwhelming, because suddenly you think, oh, I'm sharing my story with everybody now. And for my husband it was especially funny because he was asked to do a lot of joint things with me. So we did a thing in the Mail that was joint, his picture was in the Herald, and a lot of the features that I wrote I was asked to write were about my relationship with him. So for Red Magazine it was about my relationship with my husband and how that had been affected. And so there was this strange, and to an extent I was more used to it, because with every book there's a certain amount of publicity, a certain amount of, my husband's an accountant, he's not used to it all. So for him it was slightly, oh, that's my picture. And having the experience together was quite nice, actually. It was nicer than only having it on my own.
I love the little part you put in, which is the short note about love. I thought that was incredibly powerful. Certainly something that's on my mind at the moment. I think, and it comes up so much about how our stories, and actually I think probably affects many people who are also public about our backgrounds and what we've been through, and that impact that it has, as you say, on husbands and family and everybody around us as well. It's quite revealing, isn't it? You have this personal story. Yeah, I can imagine it's quite daunting seeing a book on the shelf in that instance.
I think it is. I think the most some of the newspaper articles were the most daunting, because you then get these threads after.
Oh, the comments section. Yeah, comments.
Some of them can be nice, but some of them are terrifying.
They are.
And also on Twitter, I did Twitter quite a lot on the run-up to the book, and there I got quite a lot of mansplaining, just, you know, kind of arbitrary messages from men telling me how I could deal with my infertility, what I could do. I hadn't been thinking about it. Suggestions that maybe I should have encouraged my husband to marry someone else and not be selfish. Somebody else telling me it was my punishment from God. So that was. I'm fairly thick-skinned, thankfully, but I mean that was kind of relentless in the first few weeks after publication. I mean it's quiet now, thank God, but that was fairly relentless.
I bet it was. And kind of ironic, given that the book really sets out to kind of educate and inform. It's kind of it clearly they'd never read it before they commented, but yeah. That must be really hard to deal with. I've only had it very briefly in a newspaper article and swore never again, and I'm tentatively stepping back into it, but it's hard, those comments, aren't they?
What happened to you? Was it the comments or?
Oh yeah, comments and generally the paper kind of basically rewriting most of what I had written, all to do with the campaign to save IVF on the NHS.
Oh.
Yeah, which everyone has an opinion about IVF.
Oh yeah, people do. I know. It's really, no, I know. It's not an illness, so why should it be on the NHS?
Oh yeah,
it's caused by an illness, and I kept saying that to people.
There's a lot of banging your head against brick walls on that one. Yeah. The amount of help I had in order to sort of I can help you conceive. Oh, lovely. I don't think I want you to do that now. If your profile picture is anything like what you are, then absolutely not. Can I ask a little about the actual process of the book? So that process of research and talking to people, it feels from the book that it's very organic, that you met people along the way and it was word of mouth. Is that very much how it worked for you?
It's how it started. So a lot of the organic stuff is how I wrote. I mean, I don't know if you know, I mean, you used to be in publishing, so presumably you know the process. So I write a proposal, I send a proposal to my agent sends a proposal to various publishers, the publisher offers money, the one that offers the most money or the one that I have the best relationship with then publishes the book. So to write the proposal, lots of the stuff was fairly organic. It was stuff I had accumulated over a period of several years. So the years we were in the Middle East, the years we lived in Italy, and to some extent stories of people I knew. So that was true until that point. But then the minute the book was commissioned, it kind of became a job in a way. So I started doing very formal things to elicit stories. So I got in touch with a charity I used to work with, who led to another charity, who led to another charity, and I met people that way. I put notices in churches, I put notices in a mosque, I sent emails to people I knew who had good contacts in various regions where I thought there might be stories. I contacted a filmmaker whose work I really admired, Yaba Bado, whose story of the woman appears in the book, and she was fantastic and helped enormously. So it became very formal then, and that was a lot of my job, was finding stories in a very formal and very driven way, and also online. So I would post things on social media and share them, and people would then email me, and all the kind of usual things. But it was huge. It was a huge task, and there were lots of replies and lots of stories that didn't make it into the book.
Yeah, it's interesting that there's lots of replies and you got that feedback, because it's still very, very hard to get people to talk about their stories, isn't it? And to share that and to answer some I would imagine, some very compelling questions as well.
Yes, and to be fair, most of the stories I got that were true stories that were really captivating or engaging, I had an introduction that led to them. So there was an element of trust, because the people I was speaking to knew that my story, although I was privileged and in the West and everything else, there was still that commonality. And I actually found that the commonality of infertility was in many cases stronger than any cultural difference. There was a real empathy with many of the people I spoke to. But also I work at Middlesex University, so I did have access to academic sources, and I could call people in universities that I knew had worked in the area and say, well, would you mind letting me know who these people are? Well, often the answer is no, because university grants mean you have to be very strictly secret in not sharing your information, but occasionally that would lead to something, and then I could merge things.
Absolutely. It's interesting, isn't it? That I find we find it a lot, I think, in our communities, that infertility, and it doesn't matter how you come to that point where you find that you cannot have children. It's a shared thing. It's a shared, almost like a taboo secret sometimes. But it pulls you together. That power of our community is sometimes quite astonishing, isn't it?
I find that too. And although the book is about people who are also choose not to have children, and is about, how that's stigmatized and the problems around that, I felt that the kind of empathetic relationships were with women who were infertile, and with two men who were infertile as well. So the empathetic closeness came with shared infertility and what that means. It's not that I wouldn't listen to stories of other, problems and other issues, but that particular issue was the one that brought me most close to some of my subjects, I think.
Yeah. Is there one person in the one subject that you particularly moved you more than another, or did they all move you in different ways? Any connections that you have kept?
Actually, the one that moved me most is someone I'm not in touch with, I think. It's probably the mother of Sura, the Indian girl.
Oh gosh, yes. I was going to say that Sura always gets me.
I want to stay in touch afterwards. She said, we've done what we want. I mean, I tried to, and she said, we've done what we wanted to do. And that was the most moving of the story. Also because she was the story that I knew most about, the people that I never met them face to face. It was all done on Skype. But that was the story that impacted me most personally, that I was most moved by. But also because at the time that I did that interview, I was working with a charity called Reach India. And there I was getting little glimpses of stories third hand through a very kind charity worker who helped me. And those were devastating. And I started to worry how many of those stories would be just like Sura's. So in terms of impact, that was the one that affected me most.
Yeah, it's a very, very moving story. It's one that stays with me afterwards, and the fact that actually the family were prepared to share that and to do that, and that one hopes it was cathartic for them, or it put something to rest for them. I do hope so. I
think they just wanted to know that her voice was heard, that she hadn't been forgotten. That was all, and that's true in a lot of cases. The women in the women that I took from Yamabado's film, The Witches of Gambaga, those women.
Yeah.
Yaba was very kind and shared her transcripts with me. And when I said to her, I'm going to tell the story of some of the women from your film, using the transcripts which never made it to the film, but they're about childlessness and they were amazing. I said, do you want me to change the names? Can you ask the women, please? And she said, no. She said, you must keep the names the same. Because she said the women wanted to be known, wanted to be remembered, did not want to be left as outcasts in these witch communities that were created for them. And so their names are all the same because they wanted to be known.
Wow, that's incredible. Wow, it's slightly blown me away. That's incredible. The whole idea of witchcraft and all of the myths and the truths around that, I think, is incredibly compelling. I know I started to look at that once when I'd been to a witchcraft museum, and years ago, before I knew that I was childless. And then you start to see this theme and you think, oh God. And then of course it comes back to you and you find out and think, okay, yeah, this is quite painful. Those judgments that people make. And it's a way of kind of categorizing, or perhaps a woman. It's compelling, very, very compelling.
It's a way of controlling, I think, too, because there's a real feeling. I mean, obviously the women in Gambaga are not only there because they're childless, as you will see from the book. They're there for a variety of reasons. I was interested in the ones that were sent there elders. But for many of these communities, childlessness is also seen as a kind of almost infectious curse. So you can curse other people by looking on them or bring them your bad luck.
And going back to Sir's story, it's interesting that it's a female thing. It's never the man.
Well, it can be the man. There's one of the short notes where I talk about some of the countries where with men there are really horrible names for men who can't conceive, and testes, dysfunctional non-man, and so on. And of course there's all this issue around the childless men in China and what they have to put up with, and the stigma, and also social problems of being alone without family.
I think men have it incredibly difficult in our Western world. It's something that Robin Hadley and Michael have talked about before, and I'm sure it'll pop up in a future issue that we do with him. But it's those labels and the connotations that, it's quite frightening, I think, around the world. And I think men have it's so difficult for them to speak out. It's very good that they actually have a voice in your book as well. That's very important. Can I ask, how has it changed your life, this Childless Voices?
The book?
Writing it, the impact of publishing it, has it made an impact or changed your life in any way?
Not really. It's just I'll move on to another book. So.
Another book, yeah.
Not really. I suppose for me, personally, it's almost like a kind of closure. But to be fair, we adapted to our childlessness a few years ago. So I've become accustomed to it over a period of years. I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 years or so. I can't put a time on it, but we're fine with it now. So the book, I can't say the book brought me catharsis because I had catharsis before I wrote it. But I can say it made me feel fortunate in the sense that I was born where I am. And I always feel that kind of sense of privilege. I mean, I'm from a very working class background, and I don't really think of myself as privileged because of that. I grew up in a very rough council estate. My dad worked at a factory. My mum was a cleaner. We never had enough money. I'm used to that kind of identification of myself as not being, but in fact, I'm a white Western woman. I am extremely privileged. Yeah. And the book and the interviews for the book taught me how much that privilege is. I mean, you kind of know, but I mean in a real way, a visceral way.
Yeah, I can understand that. I think the ending of the book is hopeful, and I hope that I've came away from it feeling that, that sense of privilege of where I am, but also having learned a lot as well. It's a very beautiful ending to the book.
Thank you. I hoped it helped people. I mean, I kind of hoped that people read it and thought, these are terrible stories, there but for the grace of God, and actually, maybe I too can move on. And because for some people that's not possible because of where they live, because of the accident of their birth. They don't get the chance to move on and have lives doing other things.
Absolutely, yeah. We can be very constrained by what's around us. That isn't something we can control. It's that circle, the zone of control, what we can control of what is around it. Sometimes we just can't do that, and we have to make the best sometimes of what we have, and that can be quite difficult depending on where you live in the world and what's around you. There's cultural and religious sensitivities. Yeah. One last question for you is, any advice for anyone who's thinking of writing in our childless community?
I don't know, really. Do you mean because someone who's a writer and wants to do a book on childlessness, or just people who want to write about their experience?
About their experiences.
Well, I think it depends what you want to do it for. I mean, I always tell my students this: if you are writing for yourself to explore your own emotions, to explore what you feel, then publication isn't really that important. What's important is that you write it down and have it for yourself. I think if you see the writing itself as being cathartic, as being an exploration of how you feel and how you experience your new situation, then it might be more helpful than if you start seeing it as a kind of career plan, so you kind of think, I'm going to become a writer because I'm childless, so I'm going to write about childlessness. I think one of the things, I like the communities, and I found them very supportive and helpful and inclusive, and I think that's great because it's not true of many other causes or areas. They're not always as inclusive. But I think what I would really like to see, I don't know, I guess, is women going on to build lives that they enjoy, that mean something for them, that kind of go beyond their childlessness. And it's really sad if everybody who's childless starts making their childlessness their career.
Yes, yeah. It's finding that plan B, or I don't know, A, B, C, D, or even the Z, the plan that the way that you get past that life unexpected, which Jodie Day, of course, talks an awful lot about with Gateway Women. And in the interview we had with her last week, it's finding other routes so it doesn't become your overriding definition.
Exactly, and it doesn't become your job. So a lot of childless women, it ends up being their job. Their job is about counselling childless women, or marshalling childless women, or setting up things for childless women, or dealing with childless women, or talking about childlessness, or writing solely about childlessness. So in a sense, their childlessness became their job, and that might be fine for some people, but I think it's a dangerous thing if it becomes true for all childhood, because then they're even more tying in their identity of self with their inability to do something.
Yeah, it's a perpetual trigger.
Exactly. Yeah. So it'd be quite nice to see these women going off, I don't know, and going to art college because they always wanted to, or writing a book about, writing a novel because they always wanted to, that's not about childlessness. Studying, I don't know, whatever, mathematics because they didn't get to do it when they were young. So doing something that's about them, but not about their childless identity.
Yeah. So, absolutely. I couldn't put it better myself as someone who went off to art college.
Did you? Oh, good for you.
Fell into a master's, didn't mean to do it. Thought, oh, that'll do. And ended up
you.
Thank you so much, Lorna, for talking to us today and to talk a little bit more about Childless Voices. We'll put all of the links to where people can buy the book from and to your interviews as well on our show notes as well. But thank you very much for joining us today.
So Michael, tell us your story then. What's this story about?
There was a girl called Bridget Sullivan in our village, or in my street. I was 6, and that was the first time I'd ever wrote anything. But I can remember it was, "I love you very must," because I didn't know what much was. So that was my first experience of writing.
Oh,
I think my first experience of writing something like a proper letter was Blue Peter, which for anyone, I think everyone probably knows Blue Peter, but anyway, it's a BBC children's programme, and I wrote something to go with a submission for a competition, and I won a Blue Peter badge.
No way.
I've got 3 of them, and my mum used to make us. Well, my mum used to make us write them. We were like, "You're good at drawing." I think it was a way of trying to make me earn my keep. That she could say I did something useful. All of my other friends at school were probably like, "Oh, they're winning in like the egg and spoon race and stuff like that." And I was just, "What can you?" "Oh, I know, Blue Peter badges." So I ended up getting 3. Steph from World Childless Week said, "Oh, you got 3 badges. I hate you."
I was going to go down that line, but I'll leave it there.
Yeah, let's just leave it there. Yeah, there's a whole world of podcast listeners going, "I bloody hate her now."
Borderline bullying, isn't it?
But did you get to meet Shep the dog?
No, I didn't get to go. Oh God, no, I never got anywhere near there. We drove past it one year when we were going down to Paddington Station, and my dad took us round that way, and I can remember seeing the BBC television centre and thinking, oh, that's where Petra and Shep live, because it was it Petra then? I think Petra passed by then, but it definitely was Shep. But no, I never got to meet John Noakes or anybody, or Simon Groom or anyone.
Oh, Simon Groom was the one I know with Goldie.
Yeah, that's it. Simon Groom was kind
of my era.
Yeah, it was Simon Groom, Goldie the dog, and Peter Duncan, wasn't it?
Oh yes,
Peter
Duncan. Duncan Dares. Yeah. Oh God, this is totally reminiscing now. Like, what? Who?
Why?
Yeah.
Right. Sarah, your first thing you wrote ever.
First thing I wrote ever. Well, funnily enough, actually, my mum, excuse the background noise, my mum sent me this the other day. You're not going to be able to see it because it's on camera, but it's like...
Sarah's holding up a letter with some really cute drawings on it.
Yeah. It's
so what was that?
So it's about Squeaker, the squirrel. A whole story. And it's like, I must have been about, I don't know, 6 for this, but it's the story about Squeaker. I didn't read it, honestly. But it got me a good try and a gold star. So that was probably one of my first examples of writing.
I like the drawings, they're very good.
Yeah, it looks like an orange peanut with legs. But yeah, that's the first example.
We'll have to make you read it out in a moment when we have wine or something, or beer.
A heck of a lot of beer, yeah, maybe. Get past the cringe. But yeah, that's the first example. But I was wondering actually around, because obviously we're going to be talking to a lot of authors in this episode, which author, and it can be any genre, fiction, it could even be about childless not by choice issues, which author has touched you the most, affected you the most?
Oh my God, that is a horrible question.
Michael's had a thought, I think.
Hang on, yeah, I've got to Google, so if you hear some typing, that's me, because I know what I want to say, but I've got to make sure I do this justice, because this is sorry. Anyway, someone else can talk while I'm doing it.
Can you think, Denise? Can you think?
Oh my God,
right, here we go.
Oh,
go on, Michael, you go, and I'll stop. Go on.
Okay, so back when I used to voraciously read books, I picked one up called Shame by, now I hope I do this right, Jasvinder Singh Hera. Yes. Okay, where are you? I've lost you now, because okay, there. And I recommend that for anyone. It's an English woman who with obviously an Asian background, and it's about it's about honor killing.
Oh.
So so when you say touch me the most, that was it. It just opened my eyes to the horror of this idea of honor, with Asian, well, West Asian, India, Pakistan, those sort of areas, about the horrors of honor. And she's now, through her own journey, she has I've got to go back to Google now. She has her own organization based after writing this book, and I'm trying to find it. She was born in Derby, and she founded Karma Nirvana, a nationally award-winning charity that supports both men and women affected by honor-based abuse and forced marriages.
Wow, that's so powerful that something good has come out of something so shocking, isn't it?
It is. So I would recommend that book to anyone. But if I can just hog the camera microphone. But the next one is A Time to Dance by, and I think it was Melvin Bragg.
Oh yes, yeah.
That for me, that was it was a love story written from a man's perspective, and I just thought it was a beautiful piece of work. Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, who's next?
Berenice?
Who's done this? Berenice, have you done your research?
I find it so difficult because I read so much, and I studied an English literature degree, so I feel like I'm overwhelmed by books. I suppose a book that that influenced me when I was much, much younger, before all of this happened. And it's a book that I've actually, every time I've moved house, it's come with me. And I like to know where it is at all times. I don't know why. It's just one of those things. And it's called No End to Yesterday. I'm also typing because I want to make sure I get the author right. Sheila MacDonald. And she only ever wrote this one book. And it was a Whitbread Children's Award. years and years ago. 1977, in fact, was when it won the prize. And it's of a girl who's growing up in this very Victorian household, and the grandmother is the matriarch. And it reminded me a lot of growing up in my family. I have a very big family. And there was the house we all went to, and a lot of it is in the book is quite awful, how she's just trying to find her feet, and there's a conversation with her daughters as she grows up, and the whole idea of her mother not being there, which is totally just not like my family at all. But there's a lot of parallels between lots of people offering lots of advice and how you grow up, and it's a book my aunt gave it to me, and I've always just sort of kept it close to hand. And I'd hate to lose it. I've never lent it to anybody. I'm normally quite a happy person, in lending books to people, but I won't let this one out of my sight. And the other book I've read recently, again, fiction, is A Year of Marvelous Ways, which is written by, I think it's Sarah Winman. Yes, Sarah Winman, who wrote When God Was a Rabbit. And it's an absolutely just brilliant. It appeals to me for lots of reasons. The era in 1947, and the lady is called Marvelous Ways, and she lives in Cornwall. And it's just, I don't know what it is about it. It's just wonderful. I think maybe because actually Marvelous Ways lives alone in this Cornish creek on her own. Maybe just appeals to me about that. But I couldn't. I one of those books where you don't want it to end, but you know you have to, and you want to finish it, but it's just like, oh God. But I read so many books. In terms of factual books, probably the work of Pema Chondran, who is Buddhist, and she has some wonderful books that have really kind of influenced sort of thinking, I suppose, and the way I think. And yeah, I don't know, I read too much. There'll be another book. If you ask me this question on the next episode, I'll have something else for you. Because I just love books. I really do.
Oh, I know what you mean.
Sarah, what's yours?
Oh, excuse me. Hang on a sec. Excuse me. Books are like my CDs. So because I did literature as well, I've read an awful lot. But one book that really stayed with me because it resonated so much was Sylvia Plath's The Bell Jar.
Oh God, yes. What a brilliant book. Yeah, absolutely agree. Yeah.
I've read it twice because it's one of those books I don't want to read it and be disappointed by it. Do you know what I mean? It made such an impact on me that it's not one that I can go back and read time and time again. But if it's not one I lend out, it's not one that anybody else is allowed to basically touch. It's like sacrosanct. But it had such a profound effect on me because it mirrored so much of what I was going through with my mental health that it's something that I can't let it go, basically, because I keep reliving bits of it. But I think in terms of other books as well, obviously with literature, I've read a lot of literature, but with the mental health stuff, because trainee counsellor and life coach, I'm fascinated by what makes the human experience. Do you know what I mean? And there's one at the moment, I was trying to Google it while you were talking. It's called Shoot the Damn Dog, and it's one lady's experience of severe depression.
I've read that, yeah.
My God.
Incredible.
I'm only about 3 chapters in, but
yeah,
I can only read it a little bit at a time because it's so painful to read. It must have been the most painful experience to write it. But it's those sorts of, it sounds quite heavy duty. It doesn't sound like escapism, but escaping into somebody else's world is what fascinates me. So
H for Hawk is another good book, actually.
Is it?
Helen MacDonald's H for Hawk. I'd recommend that too.
Love a good book recommendation.
Yeah, it's a memoir, but it's also about the grief, the loss of it's complete grief recovery. There's another one as well about grief that I've read that's part fictional, part factual. I can't remember it. Something to do with blackbirds. I can't remember. You can cut this bit out, Michael. I can't remember it.
Blackbirds.
I'll find it for you. Oh, so God, what's it?
How do you? So, Sarah, talking about those books that you're reading, how you said you could only read them as at a piece by piece. It reminds me of a lifetime ago when I was studying psychology. I wanted to my dream was to be a forensic psychologist.
Oh, wow.
And so I read ferociously any profiling book I could get my hands on. But unfortunately, the subject matter is so dark. I had to stop reading them because you could feel it. Not that I turned into a serial killer, but you could feel it just dragging you down. Because you got so engrossed in the thing. So I had to stop writing them, reading them. Sorry. So how do you find, with that? Does it affect you?
I think, to be honest with you, I think if I was to read these maybe 6 months, a year ago, I'd be the same. It would drag me down. But I'm doing different things now. I mean, this podcast for me has been a godsend because it's put a different angle on the childlessness for me. Talking to other people face to face and seeing that people are listening to what we're saying. So for me, I'm in a different place with it. And obviously, as a trainee counsellor, I'm nosy, basically. I like to know what makes people, what's going on behind the eyes. And it just, as I say, I have to do it in little chunks. I would love to read this book in one go, but I know it would have that effect on me. It would drag me down. But I think reading little bits means that I'm dipping into someone's life and then coming back out again. Whereas if you voraciously read it, as you say, you would get sucked in, I think. The other one, it is because it brings you back to reality. It's somebody else's reality. It's not yours. But the other one I read recently that really affected me, you may not know him, Michael, Danny Baker. He's like a 90s DJ in the UK. And he used to really, really irritate me. He was a larger-than-life character. And he used to do an awful lot of sort of hip radio, hip telly. And I used to find him really irritating. But I've read his autobiographies. And in reading those autobiographies, the latest one, he had head and neck cancer. And in reading that, it's given me a whole different perspective on a man that I used to find incredibly irritating. But his books are excellent. They're very funny. They're very witty. He name drops like a demon, clang, clang, clang. Every page is a name drop. But it gives you a perspective on somebody that actually I used to find very repellent. But my husband came in the other week and I was reading this chapter and it was describing his treatment for this head and neck cancer. And I was crying. He went, "Are you all right?" And I was just, when you just relate to somebody's awful experience so much. And I had to go and put it down. And then the next chapter, he's doing some silly stories again. But it just, those sorts of books, the ones that make you cry or the ones that make you laugh or you connect with, they're just the best experience, aren't they?
Yeah, there's a book recently that I read about that made me cry, about the great outdoors, and I can't remember what it. Oh, Robert oh, crap! I can't remember. What the hell was it? You can forget this. Grief is a Thing with Feathers is the book that I was thinking of. Blackbirds wasn't far off. I could picture the cover. This is my problem. I know the covers of all the books that I read. I know what that is, but I can never remember the authors. Grief is a Thing with Feathers by Max Porter. And the other books, just to add on very quickly, the other author I'd recommend is Matt Haig, Notes on a Nervous Planet. Matt Haig is just, incredible. Absolutely incredible. And I just think his whole story of how he's, again, like Danny Baker, actually. I haven't read Danny Baker's writing, but again, I agree with you completely. So something that really irritates me, but actually the reviews of that and some of the extracts that I'd read, I think, in the media were incredibly compelling. I was in tears yesterday, actually, over a really weird thing, and it was to do with it was a magazine that we get over here in the UK called Simple Things, and it was the latest issue, and it was to do with an oak tree, and a lady had written a piece just about the oak tree outside her garden and about how she felt that because she didn't have a garden, that her oak tree had adopted her. And we have this great big ash tree in our garden, and I photograph our ash tree all the time, and of course we have ash dieback in the UK, and I get really worried about my ash tree, and it's thriving. And I just read this thing sitting under my ash tree yesterday in a complete heap of tears, because it was this whole idea of nature kind of adopting you and picking you up, and it's just like, I just want to go and hug my tree, and I was like, oh my god, I've turned into a tree hugger. I've done it. I'm there.
I've done it too.
Oh, that's all right then.
No, it's totally normal.
Oh, that's all right then. Have you ever hugged a tree, Michael?
No, I've climbed a lot.
Oh, okay, that's almost the same.
Same as.
And fell out and physically had to, cuddle them because otherwise I'd have hurt myself. So does that count?
Yeah, that counts.
Definitely.
Yeah. So we've got some shout outs to do, haven't we? Well, because we forgot to do them last time because we got terribly carried away. We would like to do a shout out actually to everybody. Can we just do a shout out to everybody? I don't know, what do we want to do around a shout out? Do we want to just cheer or something like that? I don't know. Woo! No, that's fine.
It's a bit American, isn't it?
It is. Okay, let's not do that then. Okay, so shout outs. We want to say thank you to the Gut Link. Because the Gut Link were our 50th follower on Facebook. What we did was, just to tell everybody, on Facebook, we obviously have a Facebook page, we have Instagram, and we have Twitter. And we wanted to give a shout out to our 50th follower, and that was the Gut Link, and we like them. And we put a link in our show notes so you can go and find out more about the important work that they do. And as Michael said, they are very, very cute, and we like them very much. So thank you to them. And to everybody who's actually done loads on our Facebook page as well, because we've had tons. I've also had tons on Twitter, which seems like a really good place to actually say hello, Annie Kirby, because Annie Kirby's rocking Twitter.
Hello, Annie.
Hello. Hello.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. I know, that was really good, wasn't it? Are you impressed, Michael, by that?
I am.
Thanks. I'm learning everything from you. Welcome to the Full Stop, Annie. It's lovely to have you here. We're just so pleased to have you with us because you've got some really exciting news to share about writing workshops with everybody.
Yes, I have. I've been writing a novel for ages, which is about childlessness. And I wanted to apply for some funding to the Arts Council for some funding to support me while I wrote that novel, because I have less time to go out and earn money. But I also wanted to do more than just ask for money for that, because I've found writing about childlessness to be quite a healing activity. So what I wanted to do was also ask for some money to develop some workshops, writing workshops for childless not by choice people.
That's incredible. I think that's quite amazing to actually do that, because it must be really hard to get funding, I'd have thought, from the Arts Council.
I've done it before.
Yeah.
There is kind of, I think, a knack to the applications. So the first time I did it, I had some advice from somebody who is an expert. So I carried that advice forward to this application. And one of the things that I thought was really important was that I needed to evidence that there was a need for the workshops. Mm-hmm. I couldn't just go to the Arts Council and say, it would be really lovely to do these, give me some money. So I knew that they would want a little bit more than that, because they're not going to just throw their money down the drain for something that I think would be nice. And also for myself, I just wanted to make sure there was actually a demand and a need for those workshops. So I developed a survey which was circulated through various Facebook groups for childless not by choice people. And I was overwhelmed. I had over 100 responses in a very short space of time. The first half of the survey was quite general, asking people about their experiences of childlessness. And then the second half was asking their experiences of writing and were they actually interested in a workshop, and if so, what sort of workshop would it be? So I was able to give the Arts Council some stats. Most of the people that responded to the survey were women, but not all, and most were aged between 35 and 54. So 97% said that they felt isolated or lonely socially because of their childlessness. 87% felt isolated or misunderstood by family members. 81% said they suffered from poor mental health because of their childlessness. 72% had been excluded from a friendship group. those things told me that there was potentially a need for these workshops. Just so I've been to lots of writing workshops and they're wonderful things, but sometimes, you know, if you want to write about something that's quite personal to you and then everyone else is writing about how lovely their grandchildren are, or the christening of the baby or something like that, it's not necessarily, I hate the word safe space. I hate the term safe space because I think it can kind of be mocked, but that was really what I was trying to do. That's the best word for it, I think, to enable people to write about childlessness and know that no one's going to say anything unkind in that space. So the second half of the survey, I was asking what people wanted in terms of the workshop. Do you want to write stories or poetry? And overwhelmingly what people wanted was writing for well-being. So that was really helpful to know that, because I've done some writing for well-being as a writer, but not developed, and I'm not a counsellor or a psychotherapist or anything like that. So I felt that to develop that, I should have somebody on board who's qualified. So Mariel Whale, who is quite active. She's a World Childless Week champion. She's a counsellor for childless people not by choice, and she's also a wonderful writer. She agreed to come on board with me to develop those workshops, which is really, really exciting.
That's fantastic.
Fantastic,
really fantastic,
isn't it? Yeah, it's such a big thing. The statistics are incredibly sobering, but it's really powerful to hear that you're turning that into something that can really help people and help the community, Annie. I think that's amazing. Well done, you.
Thank you. I mean, the statistics were amazing to me. I mean, most of those experiences I've had myself, not all, but most of them, but you tend to think that you're the only one.
Yeah.
And to have that many, to 97% of people to say that their childlessness has caused them to be lonely and socially isolated, I think is an absolutely staggering figure, even to me.
Yes. Yeah, I'm so surprised. I'm surprised and not surprised. I think if you're active in the community, sometimes you can see that there is more out there, to coin the phrase, more to life. But actually not everybody wants to do that. We found that at Fertility Fest that people weren't always, that was their first time there, or they were there briefly and it was too much for them. I think a lot of events can be like that, and that of course makes it very difficult for people to make those connections. So I think anything that brings that interest together of writing and exploring those feelings can really help. That's incredible, Annie.
Absolutely. And you know, the focus of the workshops, which we're still designing them, but the focus of the workshops will very much be on positivity and healing and well-being. But I still felt it was really important to have somebody like Mariel on board, because all of those emotions that could come up, I wanted to make sure there was that support there. Even as we're trying to take like a positive path to the future, and live a childless life, but a positive life, you know, those emotions can come up. I think, as we all know, they can just spring up from anywhere. So I thought it was really important to have her on board. So I was delighted when she said yes.
She's lovely, isn't she? I've met her at Fertility Fest, and she's absolutely lovely.
Yes.
Really nice person to be around, and very, very supportive. You've got just the right person, I think, involved with you there on that too. Where can people find out more about the workshops? Are they open for people to sign up? What stage are you at with planning them right now?
At the moment, they're still at the planning stages. So July and August, we're designing the workshops and booking them. So the workshops, they're going to be 4 workshops, and they're going to be actually in 2020. So we didn't want to rush them, because we think it's really important to get it right. So there'll be 4 workshops and also a webinar. So the webinar, the plan is for that to be in January, and that will be a 90-minute free webinar for anyone anywhere in the world who's childless, not by choice. Then we will follow that up with some workshops. There'll be half-day workshops. There'll be one in Brighton, one in London, one in Birmingham, one in Manchester. So the initial plan is, we haven't finalised booking arrangements with the venues yet, but the initial plan is that there'll be one in February, March, April and May, one a month for 4 months. And they're low cost. It's £5 to come along, or if that £5 would, exclude you if that's too much, then we have some bursaries available as well, so no one will be excluded due to cost. We just want them to be, they're open to women and to men, so as long as you're childless, not by choice, you're welcome to come along. You don't need any writing experience at all. It should be, the aim is for it to be a really positive experience, and to sort of put people on the road to maybe using words and using writing to heal.
That's
Can
amazing.
Can I just say that I've got really bad FOMO right now. FOMO. That's the right one, isn't it?
Yeah, the other one's not right.
FOMO.
We'll have to get you over here, Michael, won't we? I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Michael, you could still take part in the webinar.
Yeah.
I will.
Sure time it will be where you are, where we have it, but it will be, it will be a weekday evening sometime in January in the UK. So if you're not in the UK, and I did get responses to the survey from outside of the UK quite a lot, in fact. So at some point in the future, perhaps I hope that maybe the workshops can be taken on by other people to be done in other locations as well. But yeah, so certainly if you can't come along to one of the workshops, certainly sign up for the webinar.
Fantastic.
Will you record the webinar?
I'm still thinking that over, actually. I think I would like to record it. I just need a bit of feedback from to make sure people would be comfortable with that. But I think recording the webinar would be a positive thing to do, to have that there as a reference for people. So that, I think, is the plan.
Do you want to talk a little bit about your Twitter thing? Because we referred to it very briefly in our introduction. Please tell us.
Yeah, do. I was going to ask you about that. I thought it was fantastic.
Well, it was National Loneliness Week, or I can't remember what it was called. Loneliness Awareness Week.
That was it. Yeah.
There were lots of things on Twitter about different kinds of loneliness, and I didn't see anything at all about the kind of special loneliness that comes with being childless, not by choice. So I wrote this. I didn't write it as a tweet. I wrote it as a single piece of paper, and then thought, I could do a tweet thread of this. I did this on the Tuesday of Loneliness Awareness Week, and then chickened out and didn't post it, because mostly I just tweet into the void anyway. But also it's quite nerve-wracking to put something that personal out there. But on Sunday night, it was the end of Loneliness Awareness Week, and I was like, I still haven't seen anything about childlessness and loneliness, so I just pinged it out there, and it went a bit crazy, and I think it's been seen by over 1 million people, not read by over 1 million people, but certainly more than all my other tweets from the last 7 years put together.
You actually put a tweet up, didn't you? Your tweet earned 425,409 impressions over the last 24 hours. So
I think it's about double that now. So it's slowed down a lot, but it is still being retweeted or shared. And what really struck me is how many people said, you could have been in my head when you wrote that tweet. And I've had quite a lot of direct messages from people who didn't want to say on Twitter that was their experience, but also a lot of people, putting it out there for the first time, saying, quote tweeting the thread and saying, this is me, this is how I feel. So that was quite humbling, really, that people felt that they could do that, and that it resonated with so many people. And interestingly, very few negative comments, considering it's Twitter, or not that I saw anyway. If the people were negative, then they didn't tag me in. But on the whole, it was a positive response from people.
I think it's one of those amazing things with Twitter, because it's 19, was it 19 tweets, I think, in the thread. Yeah. You can follow Annie, by the way, anyone listening. Dr. Kirbs, Dr. all spelled out, Kirbs is Annie. You can go follow her. We'll put all the links onto the show notes anyway. But I think one of the things I found with Twitter is that actually, if you have a movement, a community like we do, people can be incredibly and extraordinarily generous. And sometimes I think with Childless is Not by Choice, it's kind of like a tidal wave. I think when people kind of get hold of something and they go with it, then I feel sorry for anyone that tried to troll it or do something. I think they'd be quite scared to, because it can be very powerful. People can really shoot people down, but in a very elegant way. I think there's so much evidence out there to say that actually, yes, it is loneliness, or whatever subject people talk about on Twitter. There's so much evidence from everybody, because we've all had a different aspect of something happen to us on the same theme around our grief and loneliness and isolation, as your statistics for your survey only just go to prove.
Exactly. And I think, you know, I put the tweet out there for other childless people to know that they weren't alone in their loneliness, if that makes sense. But I actually was also quite struck by the number of responses I got from parents saying, actually, I'd never really thought about this, and I'll try to do better in the future with my childless friends and colleagues. So that was nice as well, in that people weren't defensive, but rather, you know, at least the people that responded seemed to try and take it on board, and to hopefully try and be a bit more inclusive with their friends in the future.
That's really, really good to hear. That's such a powerful outcome for all of that. It just builds those bridges, doesn't it, and creates a bit different and stronger narrative. If it can just make one person who's a parent speak to someone that they had previously dismissed for being childless, then that has got to be the best thing ever.
Absolutely.
So going back to your novel, sorry.
I think you nailed it, Annie. I was reading it to Vicky today, actually. We were just sitting there reading it together, and she totally agrees. Nailed it. Thank you for the shout out, by the way.
You're welcome.
But also, I think what you've got here is a great example for our community by saying that, you know, you just put your just step over that line of fear and see what can happen. You know, I think it's a great inspirational story of what you've done with that reaching, like you say, reaching so many people.
Thank you.
No negative comments, and I think a lot of people should get some inspiration from that. So anyone who's listening, make sure you check the tweet out.
Thank you.
Sorry, Sarah.
No, don't apologise. It was a good point. I was just wondering, because obviously you say you've sort of almost bridged the gap, because that's quite unusual, isn't it? I don't think many people outside a community often think about what childlessness means for people that are going through it. Is that kind of what you're aiming for with your novel as well?
I think so, yes. The novel, I'm trying to do, I suppose, two things with the novel, which is, first thing is to write authentically about childlessness, so that, you know, my main character will not be getting a miracle baby at the end of the novel, for example. But the other thing is, I want people who aren't childless to read the novel and to enjoy it for the sake of the story, but to also come away with a bit more understanding of, you know, all kind of the experience of it, and the loneliness, and just the whole experience. It's, you know, I can't cover everything about childlessness in one novel, but I'm hoping that it will hopefully reach out to people. And I'm working with an editor on that novel who is a mum, and that's actually quite useful for me to get feedback from her. And amazing to me that she actually really gets it, and she really gets what I'm trying to do with the novel. So that's quite helpful for me to know that. That's
really powerful then, isn't it? It's showing that the message you're putting out there is getting through already, really, isn't it? I hope so, yeah. I mean, I've still got a lot of work left to do on the novel, but fingers crossed. Yeah, best of luck with it. I think yes, it's part of our community getting a voice is great, but it also, you know, bridging that gap between is such a powerful thing, isn't it? I mean, one of the things I said in my application to the Arts Council actually is about the lack of an authentic representation of childlessness in popular culture. So you often get the miracle baby, and in the media too, miracle baby stories. You get the child snatchers. So if you think of things like, or child stealers, so you think of The Handmaid's Tale. I mean, I love that book and I love the show, but childless women not shown in a very positive light.
things like, I think The Hand That Rocked the Cradle, with the crazed nanny trying to steal the baby. That's quite often. I think how I referred to it in my application to the Arts Council was those that, like, the unworthy childless, the wicked ones, and then you get the worthy childless people who get their miracle baby in the story. And I'm trying to cut through all of that. I was also my story is also about mental health and fairy tales, and quite often in fairy tales there's some kind of miracle or supernatural solution to childlessness. And I was really trying not to do that, and I kept drifting back to that trope. I was thinking about one of my favourite novels is The Snow Child, where the childless couple builds a snow child and she comes to life. And it's a lovely novel, but it's also representative of that trope. And I kept trying to come away from it and kept drifting back to it. And I realised, I like it because it's a bit of an indulgence for me. So what I decided to do, how I decided to address that, was to subvert those kinds of fairy tales a little bit and to explore them and to look at them in a different way in the novel. So hopefully it's harder than I thought it would be, but hopefully I'll be successful in doing that. So to look at why those narratives are so attractive, and how we can look at them differently as well.
I guess it also probably brings about that whole idea, the fixing, doesn't it? That I just wonder how much all of that relates to how we often feel when we talk about childlessness and people to sell us, or just adopt, or all the other fixes. I wonder if fiction and all those narratives buy into that. People just think there's a cure somewhere.
I think they do. And I mean, as a writer, I've been writing fiction for a long time. This is my first novel. I'm a short story writer. I can understand from a story perspective why those tropes are attractive to writers, because they have drama, you have a resolution, it gives someone a story arc. Giving a character a baby gives you conflict and tension, and or then resolving childlessness gives you a nice ending to a story arc. Those kinds of things, I can understand why they're attractive to writers and why they appear so often, but I also think we need to break them down a little bit and try and find different ways to tell stories about childlessness that aren't necessarily all doom and gloom either. So although my main character will not have a baby by the end of the novel, she will have hope for the future, and I think that's really important as well.
We look forward to reading it. We really, really do. Will you come back and talk to us maybe in the new year when you've done the webinar and you started doing the workshops, and tell us how it's going?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to do that. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Oh,
We'd love to also
amazing.
find out about when the book's published, how you're getting on with it. Just keep in touch with us, because I think it's a truly inspirational story. I know we've been friends for a long time on social media, and it's lovely just to hear more about what you're doing.
Thank you so much. Thank
you very much.
Thank you, Annie. That was fantastic.
And that brings us to the end of the first part of this month's shows. In the next instalment, you'll be hearing from Tessa Broad and Leslie Pine. We truly hope that if you're on the path to acceptance, you'll be inspired by the importance of being able to speak out as part of your healing process. Now, a little plug for next month's episode. It's all about men. And we'll be joined by Dr. Robin Hadley and Rod Silvers, both from the UK, who are doing some unique work to give men a voice. So boys, if you have a burning question you'd like to ask, jump on the website and contact us. And girls, if there is something you'd like to know about how us blokes deal with the issue of being childless, by all means, do the same. And as always, it's important for us to let you know you are not alone.
Yeah, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
And you're meant to look after audio, for God's sake.
Well, I was making sure that I didn't burp or fart or anything like that, and it came.
Oh, right, I'm going to stop recording now.